Hi, my name is Jennifer Weaver, and I'm a psychotherapist, a licensed clinical social worker here in McLean, and have a practice with a bunch of wonderful colleagues, including my friend Will Hayden here. We are here as guests of the Safe Community Coalition, and we're so glad to be invited to be able to talk about managing the moments right now while we're in this really unprecedented time. I'm really excited to talk to you, Will, because one of the things that I'm really interested in around your practice, which is some of the work you do around somatic experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
I know you and I were talking recently about how this is a really good time for people to try to understand a little bit more about what's going on in their bodies as a way to cope, and that there is that getting more connected around that can be really helpful to people.
Sure. A recent trend is to find other ways of helping people manage stress and manage difficulty in their lives. Sometimes talking through things and using a variety of activities is the way to go. And sometimes when talking hits a wall, or we reach a limit about how much conversation alone can accomplish, we need to turn to other resources and other methods. One of those methods is called somatic experiencing. There's others that are very similar: sensory motor psychotherapy, the trauma resilience model. What they all involve is a combination of body awareness and mindfulness. And the resource that we're using in all of these therapies is body awareness as a tool to help a person feel more regulated, feel more calm, feel more relaxed. And as you say, we're going through a lot of stress. Each person has their own form of stress. We live in a society which is full of stress. People are taking their stress both to the streets and to the ballot box this year.
Yeah.
We have to wear masks in public. There's a lot going on.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this adds up to a pretty difficult time for people. And body regulation, nervous system regulation, is a way that people have this added resource that a lot of people, I think in a way, once they hear about it, it makes sense from a kind of common sense point of view, but it does help to have a little bit of explanation.
Yeah. So how do you explain it usually to your clients?
Right. The way I usually start is I use a very simple metaphor, and it's the metaphor of, it's an old thing somebody told me when I was in school, and it made me feel a lot happier about having difficulty with school or difficulty learning. And they said, Will, I think you're having a hard time with your homework. Do you know that, you could think of your brain, if you like, as a glass of water, and the knowledge is the water that goes, somebody pours the knowledge in, that's the teacher's job, and it fills up the glass, and that's learning. And at some point, your brain gets full. And if you pour water into this glass, what happens? The water goes everywhere, you make a big mess. You start crying, your mom and dad yell at you.
Yes.
The teachers say, why have you poured my special water all over the floor?
Yes.
And you feel terrible.
Yeah.
And you never want to drink water again
Yes,
for the rest of your life. So this is the metaphor.
Well, that's a description that actually resonates with me really well, because it does feel like during these times, my brain feels all the time like there's just too much pouring in right now. So, and this overflow experience of,
Absolutely. And, as we get closer and closer to the top of that water level, the wiggle room, what I sometimes call the stress buffer that you have to work with, gets smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
And as we try to, in our very competitive, very anxious daily lives, squeeze just a little bit more in at every corner, it's like coming along with an eyedropper and putting just a few more drops just to see how much extra you can get in the container. And that usually involves disaster at some point.
It makes me think of that Monty Python movie with the guy who's eating and eating and eating, and then he's like, just one more mint.
Yes.
That's
like
an old reference. But
one wafer thin mint.
That's it.
and then disaster ensues. And
so how does body awareness connect with this idea of your brain as a container?
Exactly. Body awareness is a way that any of us can take the volume that we can hold, and with a bit of practice and a bit of time, and honestly, with the help of somebody else, we can grow the size of the container. Part of it is just the developmental process. Little kids especially when they're really little, they cry and they get upset really quickly. It makes sense. Their container is literally physically
Yeah.
as well as metaphorically very small.
Yeah.
And what happens in that situation is that a parent will come over and scoop them up and hold them and pat them and soothe them. And the parent, who is a container in themselves, takes a little bit of what's in the kid's container
Oh, yeah.
and kind of splashes it over or pours a little in.
Yeah.
And the kid feels better. 'cause-
Bails a little.
fails a little, and and you get to know your kids. You kind of get to know, like, well, what are the things that they like that help the
Yeah.
transfer of some of that stress go from their container into my container. And
Oh, that's beautiful.
yeah, it's really easy.
But you said something about growing the container?
Well, right. So
So I see that they're helping take away some of the things that the child has to hold so they can keep their container small.
this is actually very important, because if we operate too close to the limit of what the container can hold, the container can kind of get stuck in size. This is the effect of too much stress.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah. So you think about people who are really good at something. Like I always think of like a baseball pitcher. If you're a baseball pitcher, you must have done the simple action of throwing a ball a couple million times in your life. And yet you get on the big stage where your stress level is very high and you can really blow it.
Yeah,
You can throw the ball too high, you can throw it and somebody can hit a home run, and you feel terrible, you feel like you let your team down, you feel like you let yourself down. And it's not because you can't throw a baseball.
right.
It's because your stress level was too high.
Yeah,
You had reached the limit of your buffer.
okay. So this idea around if you have a certain size container and then maybe someone else can help you, what gets in the way of growing the container? Like, why doesn't it just happen naturally?
Right, and in truth, it does happen naturally. With time and with growth,
Yeah.
going from being a small kid to a teenager to an adult, the container grows organically. It's actually pretty much impossible to stop it from growing in some way. What can hold it up, however, are a few different things. So a classic example is trauma. So if a person experiences trauma early in life, the container is going to be in some way arrested close to that time. And they'll find ways to work around the smaller container, because people are incredibly resourceful
Yeah.
and they're incredibly capable. But it's always going to be a struggle. For people who maybe don't have that issue in their background, or who are dealing with stress that's more in the here and now, being overstressed or being at the limit of your capacity for too long, so your stress buffer is nearly maxed out or maxed out, that itself gets in the way of growing the container.
By always keeping it too full, it's like if you're always at max capacity, you need times when it's low.
You need times when it's low,
Okay.
absolutely. Absolutely. Because you think about, so for example, if we were talking about the baseball pitcher, a baseball pitcher might be the best pitcher in the league, but he or she still needs 5 days rest in order to be able to pitch again.
Right. Or you get that
Where they
thing
get
and you have to do the surgery and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pain in the neck to
Yeah.
have all that stuff going on. So
Yeah.
you've got to have rest. And rest and the time and the opportunity to reduce the load on the container
Yeah.
is what allows a person to
Okay.
then grow the container.
Yeah.
And this is where parents' involvement is so important, because kids don't know this.
Yeah.
And you can see little kids who you can see them getting stressed out, they're getting overworked, they're crying, they're tired, they just can't do it. And you have to say, listen, you're too tired to do this now. It's okay. We need to take a break. We're going to take a nap. We're going to do something different. And if we feel like it after that, we'll come back to it.
And this, of course, happens with teenagers and young
Oh, yeah.
all the time, especially, I think, with school and friendships, too. But certainly just the constant load that they carry, that if they're never taking a break and then they have to go to their sport or they go to their rehearsal and then they... So this is also a time, really, during this pandemic where we can take, if they have a little less going on, that these might be moments where people can hopefully reduce their container a little and grow it in moments.
Right. No, that's exactly right. And so you want to lower the amount that's in the container. If it gets too low, you don't have enough going on in your life. It's
Yeah.
just like the container can start to feel a little empty.
Yeah.
So I think the metaphor is helpful
It's a
there
great
too.
metaphor, yeah.
Because you don't want
Works
to
both
sort of
ways.
feel like, your glass is just got a little bit left in it. You always want to have something going. It's a question of how much, and having enough to keep you interested, but not so much that you're feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah.
That overwhelmed feeling, which most people seem to know, I've yet to meet someone who doesn't know about it.
Yeah.
That overwhelmed feeling is what stops growth.
Okay.
And that's where, if you're a pitcher, you have to rest. If you're a teenager, you have to take a break, especially from something like social media.
Yeah.
You used to be able to take a break by just going home. There were only 3 or 4 channels of TV to watch to begin with.
Right.
And now you can get TV on your phone, in your pocket, wherever you go. You can be texting while you're watching TV. There's no escape from stimulation, information, and activation. The temptation to fill up your glass is always there.
That's why this is so important, because we're just taking time to just stop, pause, body sensation, get a little curious. You can't do that when you're watching TV and running 5 programs on the computer.
Yeah, yeah. And this is how a parent can model behavior really effectively for kids too. Because you do some stealth
Yeah.
body awareness for yourself, and then you talk to your kids who are struggling with homework and having a fight with somebody, and you'll find it's just a lot easier to listen to them.
Yeah.
And when they feel listened to and they feel like you're more relaxed, you're stimulating them to do the same thing.
And then their container gets lower, which allows them to grow their container more, and it's a
And as a
virtuous
parent,
circle.
exactly. And as a parent, then you're feeling a little calmer because
Yeah.
they're not so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And who needs 5 overwhelmed people around them?
Yeah.
I don't.
Me either. This is really useful information and seems so important for right now, because our containers are only a certain size, but the stuff we're pouring in is more and more and more. People are constantly, when I talk to them, describing how they have sort of brain fog, or they can't think straight, or they call it blurs day, or like, you can see people are really overloaded. You can literally see the overflow. So what should we do?
Great question. Well, let's go back for a second to this idea of the parent and the child.
Yeah.
Because this is really interesting. So imagine you have a kid, and it could be a small kid, it could be a 10-year-old, it could be a teenager. They need a lot of co-regulation. They need someone to say, it looks to me like your container is getting close to full,
Yeah.
and I'm going to help you.
Yeah.
And there's so many different ways you can do this. And all you have to do is ask a parent, well, what do you do when your son or daughter starts to get overworked about something? And they'll tell you, usually what I do is I pick him up, or I pick them up. Or sometimes, I make them a special food that they like to eat. Sometimes it's as simple as touch. I put my hand on them and I say, okay,
Yeah.
let's talk, let's do something.
I have a college kid where we just watch The Office.
Yeah, right? It's perfect, right? Some activity.
It's something we've seen 1,000 times. It's completely undemanding. There's something regulating about that.
Right, and so I would say that in this metaphor, when you guys watch The Office together, you've kind of calmed to a point where some of this stress water, for
Yes.
lack of a
Our
better term,
stress water.
can go from one person.
It's not delicious.
It's not delicious, but one person can take it from the other.
Yeah.
The parent usually has the bigger container.
Usually.
Yeah. But not always.
Yeah.
And parents today are as stressed out as they've ever been, and with good reason. With
Yeah,
good
absolutely.
reason. And so when you think about it, if you've got 2 people and they're both at the limit of their stress buffer, there's not much more room to give, that can cause problems.
Yeah.
That's communication, that's emotional regulation, that's behaviors, that's everybody getting angry at everybody. That's several seasons of Office watching.
Yes. So there's a co-regulation, and I'm assuming we do this as adults with each other, with friends, with family. What about doing it for yourself?
So, absolutely. So, somebody who taught me about this once said, for example, that if she wants to help her kids co-regulate, she uses some stealth body awareness.
Stealth body awareness. Okay.
Yeah. So the method would be to use what I'm going to teach you in a second here. And she would do it for herself first. So she'd go into her bedroom or a private place, and she'd go through these 3 steps. And then she would come out and talk to her kids.
Oh, wow.
And because she was more regulated,
Yeah.
she had
She had some more space so that she could take in some of theirs.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so the first thing you want to do in order to start this process for yourself, and this is the body awareness, is pause.
Yes. When you say that, it makes me,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's sometimes not easy to do because you might live in a noisy house. There might be a lot going on.
Yeah.
Somebody might be having a fight and screaming. You might be trying to cook. There might be
5 different people all in their rooms trying to be on Zoom or whatever, trying to study and learn and work all at the same time.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Pause. Okay.
The pause is important because usually what's happening is the mind and the body are conspiring to add a few drops of water into an already full.
Yes.
The pause is
So
saying,
you're like, no more droppers, no more water, no more pouring right now.
we need to slow it down.
Okay.
And so the pause allows a person to slow themselves down and stop attending to all of these other parts of their life, which are basically like bringing water into
Yeah.
the container. The second thing you're going to want to do after you manage to achieve some level of pause, and perfect is not necessary, just some level of pause.
And are you talking like 5 seconds? Or are you talking like 2 minutes?
I would experiment. I think for some people you can do kind of a mini pause that's just a few deep breaths. Some people need to walk around the block. That's more of a prolonged pause. But you'll know it because the next thing that you're going to want to do is bring a little attention to your body.
Okay.
You're going to want to notice, to the best of your ability in that moment, what's going on in my body. And sometimes you need a few breaths to do that. Sometimes you need to walk around the block. But somewhere along the way, you'll figure out, I'm no longer thinking. I'm a little bit more aware of how my body's holding all of this stress.
So when you say that, it makes me feel a little resistant. I know that I'm somebody who doesn't really, it's a little uncomfortable for me I'd rather think it all out than like connect with my body. Do you find that other people have that experience?
All the time. That's what I go through.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really hard to do.
Yeah.
And that's why I really want to stress to you and anybody else who would be listening, just the idea that imperfect is normal.
Okay. And so when you say pay attention to your body, can you give an example? Like, are you using words for this? Are you...
Yeah, absolutely. So you can start by just this is a really simple way to do it, which is if you sit down somewhere in a quiet room and just sit down on a chair or even the edge of the bed and put your feet flat on the ground, and you can put your hands on your thighs like this, and you can just sit there and take a few deep breaths. And as you're breathing, try to breathe a little slower if you can. And literally just notice what it feels like to sit in the chair. So as I'm doing it right now, I'm thinking about, I notice my feet on the ground. I notice the feeling of weight I have in my lower body, so like under my legs where they're meeting the chair. I notice a little bit of tingling feeling in my toes. I kind of always get it with these shoes, so that kind of makes sense to me. Why am I having this feeling? I'm noticing there's a little bit of a breeze in this room just because of the air conditioning. So I notice that one side of me feels air more than the other side.
Yeah.
How about yourself? When you've got a chance here, what do you notice?
I notice my throat feels a little tight. I think because we're doing this, I feel a little nervous, and so there's probably a little sort of a little tension in my body. Like I'm a little aware, like I don't know quite what. Right.
And where do you notice the tension?
In my shoulders, in my knees. Weirdly, I don't know.
So let's take a moment and would it be okay if we hung out with maybe some of the tension in your shoulders?
Sure. Let's hang out with the tension in my shoulders.
Yeah. And I'll just sit here.
It doesn't seem like a pleasant person to hang out with, shoulder tension, but all right.
Yeah.
Hi, shoulder tension.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we're just going to notice what it feels like, the feeling itself.
Yeah.
And noticing the sensation. And
Yeah. So my left shoulder feels a little lower than my right. Feels a little, I don't know. Makes me want to move them. It's funny, I was completely not aware of my shoulders before, but I'm highly aware of them. It seems to be spreading a little bit to my chest, like there's a little bit of, does it make sense that it also,
Yeah,
What do you
so-
think about that?
So this is great, right? So
Okay.
we're noticing something in the shoulders, you're noticing spreading a little bit, so the feeling is moving.
Yep.
Yeah, I wonder what happens next.
It makes me want to breathe a little more slowly because it's moved to my chest or my lungs or something. Oh, that's funny.
What just happened?
Oh, well. I felt like a little grounded something. I felt like there was like a little auger in my body,
Uh-huh.
and I just sort of went, and it went clink. I don't know, something just clinked.
So something clinked.
Something connected.
I noticed you had a big smile and kind of
Yeah.
you went kind of like, oh.
Yeah, something
Oh.
happened in there.
So this is a great example of a little bit of very brief
Yeah.
sensation tracking and body awareness.
Sensation track. Okay, so first I take the pause,
Mhm.
then I do the sensation tracking.
Mhm.
Okay. And this is going to help me grow my container
Absolutely.
so I can add more and more stress and be just fine. And that's our goal.
The goal is to have the biggest container of anybody you know.
I'm interested in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a competitive sport.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now that you've used this opportunity to notice what was going on in your body, you actually, without really very much prompting, went into the third step,
Okay.
which was to be curious
Yeah.
about what just happened.
Be curious.
Yeah.
Okay. And it is curious. I was curious how it spread, how it moved, because it did when you asked me to pay attention to it. And I was curious about this more sort of grounded thing that happened.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to put two and two together around that and the container having more space. Is it helping me to drain is the container sort of the same size but we're draining out some of the stuff, or is it really more capacity? I know it's a metaphor and
No, you've actually touched upon the perfect word.
Okay.
And if you were a somatic experiencing practitioner, you would hear the word and use the word capacity all the time.
capacity, yeah.
Yeah. What we're trying to do is increase a person's capacity to hold more feeling, more emotion, more of the stress of life. And the idea of the container is that the more capacity I have, the more capacity the people around me will be able to borrow from. And this is the relationship. This is how
Yeah.
containers co-regulate each other.
And we can be more available to each other.
You can be more available to each other.
Yeah.
So this is so interesting because you were able to do the pause. Part of your pausing was noticing, I'm not sure where this is going to go today. I'm not sure if I really like this well.
Yeah.
We went into the body awareness part. So you expressed some curiosity about what was going on, and you did some sensation tracking, and along the way, something around your curiosity about it became more of what you were experiencing than the resistance and the annoyance.
Yeah.
Something gave way to something else.
Yeah.
And what do you think from your own experience? What happened?
Something gave way to something else. I don't know. I felt like I had more capacity. I guess that's true. I guess that is.
And now that we're talking now
Yeah.
that we're doing it together,
Yeah.
how does it feel now?
It feels, I don't know, well, I feel a lot of relief. I feel some relief in my body. And frankly, I feel a little more connected to you, like we were in the beginning. We know each other well. We've known
Right.
each other for years. And it's like I'm more aware of you, too.
You were like my ideal client because you were doing all the talking
No,
for
you're
me.
just saying that.
Because you just said it. I have more space for you.
Yeah.
Yeah? So this is the co-regulation.
This is awesome. We should do this every day before we start our days.
And so just to sort of say to that point, it is tricky to get into the habit of doing this kind of pause,
Yeah.
notice your body, and be curious. It's not something that comes naturally. You have to practice it.
Well, and it's the opposite of what you want to do because you're under all this stress. And so you think, well, I don't have time to pause and get curious and notice, who cares how my knees feel? Are you kidding? I got to do this and this. And
Right.
So-
I've got to drive somewhere in a hurry, pretend that I'm not going to text while I drive.
Right.
And do all these crazy
Exactly.
things. And that's not, as we say, just problems happen when we take that approach.
Right.
And this is where we can intervene in a way that is easy.
Well, it makes me think of that old saying, a stitch in time saves nine. Like if you take care of yourself in those moments when before you get really overfilled, and just take some time to do that, then you have more capacity for the rest of your day, and you don't need those extra 9 stitches.
You don't, and you have more energy for all the things that you want to do.
Yeah.
So this is part of it too, which is that when your stress buffer starts to get close to that critical level, where there's maybe just an inch or a half an inch left in the glass, or something like that, people do not perform well.
Yeah.
If you're a baseball pitcher, you're really going to struggle to win the World Series under all that pressure. It's going to be tough.
Yeah.
If you're a musician, you're going to give a performance where you're going to play a wrong note more than you would otherwise. If you're at work and you have a big case or something like that you're working on, you're going to struggle. It's going to take that much more energy because you have that much less room to play with. And
So before those big moments, this is also another good time to do it, as well as times when you're struggling maybe with relationships with other people where you just need to take that space and then have a little more space for the other
Right.
people who are all trapped in your house with you these days.
Right. So this brings us to a kind of a meta concept, which I think people will find fun. We've talked about how a kid is a small but growing container, and part of the growth is natural. They literally grow from 10 pounds to 200 pounds. And adults are part of the container too. They're bigger than their kids, and so the kids lean on them and rely on them over and over again to borrow some of that extra capacity. Because if you're a kid, you don't have it. And when you max out your capacity, you cry or you have a tantrum or you just get frustrated and you can't do your homework, or you slam the door open in the middle of a parent's conversations to say, my boyfriend is an hour late, what the heck's going on with this guy?
Yeah.
Rah, rah, rah. The family itself is also a container. So if we take all the pieces
Oh.
and we kind of put them together, that family has an amount of capacity.
Yeah.
As a group.
Oh, I love that.
So you'll have mom's capacity
Yeah.
and dad's capacity and whoever else is in the house's capacity, the kids' capacity. Pets are the geniuses of this. They seem to have almost limitless capacity. And I don't know if it's an advantage that they can or can't talk, but
Maybe that's where they're getting all their capacity.
maybe that's where they're
They
getting
have a
it.
lot of body awareness.
Right, right.
They're very connected.
And pets are wonderful at helping people regulate.
Yeah.
The family itself is like one large container. It's the sum total and maybe more of all of the individuals and what they can manage. So as an individual, if I increase my capacity by even 5%, and maybe I increase it over 5% over a few months of doing this kind of practice, I've probably actually not only increased capacity for me, but I've allowed all the other people in the family who are living there in the house with me more flexibility.
Yeah.
They've got more room to work with. And then we go from a place where we're all kind of waiting for one person to overflow first to a place where everybody's got more wiggle room. We have more room in our containers. And with that extra room, there's a lot more energy. There's a lot more creativity.
Yeah.
There's a lot more relaxation and enjoyment.
Yeah.
It's a much easier life.
Oh, that's really great. It's been really fun to talk to you about this.
My
And
pleasure.
it's been fun to feel this as we talk too.
Yeah.
It's nice to really do it and not just, like you said at the beginning, like talking has its limits, and then beyond that, there's
Right.
other things we can do. So,
It's been fun.
Yeah.
It has been fun.
thanks so much to the Safe Community Coalition for having us on. See you next time.
Take care.